What's up, Harlem? I'm Deanna.
And I'm Jake.
And this is HNN. As many of you know, this past September was Suicide Prevention Month.
The topic relates personally to a lot of people who either suffer from mental illness or have loved ones who suffer. The organization Shatter Our Silence works to end the stigma surrounding mental illness and suicide.
This week, HNN took a break from its regular broadcasting to help break the stigma of suicide and mental illness.
Can you tell me about your uncle?
He loved to ride up downhill on mountains in Colorado, and that's like what his whole life was about, I guess. That was like his passion, and he owned his own like car place, I guess, where he like fixed up really good cars, and his main passion and like thing to do was riding his bikes up and down the mountains.
My son Tommy was a fun kid. He loved to play jokes a lot. He played soccer. He was very good at soccer and played club soccer for many years. He was just always smiling and always kind to other people. But he struggled a lot with emotional and different things in his head a lot of the time that started early on in junior high and started to progressively get worse when he was in high school, and he was diagnosed with depression and anxiety.
Around sophomore year, I started getting really stressed with like school, and then I was telling my parents about my grades, and I just felt like everything I did wasn't good enough. It was like I was trying and trying and trying, but I was never reaching the point that I wanted to be or the expectations that I felt like my parents had set for me. So I told my mom how I was feeling because I could feel myself retracting from everyone around me. Like I no longer wanted to participate in a dance, and I didn't want to hang out with my friends, and it was like I was slowly just crawling into this shell. So I told my mom, and I went to the doctor, and I was put on antidepressants. But as I was taking those, instead of getting better, I continued to get worse. So there was one night where me and my mom were arguing about something that normally I would have been able to just brush off and move on. But because of my current mental state at the time, I was done. Like I just couldn't do it anymore. So I took around 30 of my antidepressants, and I just went to bed, and I decided that was it. So I spent that night crying myself to sleep and just like contemplating everything that I had done wrong in my entire life, which is a pretty big thing to worry about when I was only 15 and I was just trying to get through school. So as a result of that, I woke up the next morning and I was vomiting, I was in extreme pain, and there was like a huge weight on my shoulder, like, why was I still here?
My uncle's suicide was like really hard on me. Well, not only me, but me and my mom, my brother, and my grandparents, and his girlfriend, and everybody that he knew. And it's like still hard to this day to really talk about it, but I feel better talking about it. And I like talk about it as much as I can because I want other people to like realize that suicide doesn't only have an effect on you, but it has an effect on like your friends and your family, and it's not something that I want other people to go through.
That's a hard one. It affected everything in my life. I mean, my son was my children are my world, and not having him in our life is very hard. And I miss him every day, and I wish I would have known the things that I needed to know before it was too late. And our lives will never be the same now that he's gone.
As I was coming back to school from being out of the hospital, a lot of people were coming up to me and saying, you know, I heard what you did, and I heard you took 30 pills, and I heard this and that. And I was just stuck in a place of like, what is the point? Like, even though I had gone through the entire week and I felt great about myself at the end of it. Coming back was really hard because I was trying to juggle school, but then I also was filled with this fear of everyone knowing what I had done. And I think that set me back a couple of steps. And then, not that I was so much thinking about killing myself again, but I was back in a place of just feeling like I didn't have a purpose. I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't know what to do with myself. And it definitely took a lot of pushing myself to be able to, just jump back into school and hang out with my friends again and participate in dance again. So I think the way that suicidal thoughts have impacted me the most is not being able to carry on with my everyday life and complete my responsibilities and just being able to complete my everyday tasks, I guess.
And what is one myth about suicide that you want to set straight?
That it doesn't end the pain and suffering that you're going through. It continues on throughout your family and your friends.
I think the myth that it only happens to people that have warning signs. Sometimes there are no warning signs, and it can happen to the overachiever, the person that has the best grades, that's at the top of his class, that's getting accepted into all the colleges, that looks like their life is totally perfect and put together, but they struggle with suicidal thoughts, and they often act on those thoughts too. So that's a myth, that it just happens to people that have a lot of issues like addiction and bad grades and depression and things like that. It can happen to anyone.
A lot of times people would ask me, what do you have to be upset about? Or what's so bad about your life that you need to kill yourself? And depression isn't always something that is a result of a bad circumstance. A lot of times it's just an imbalance of chemicals in the brain, or it's just not feeling good enough about yourself. And I think that people look at suicide as oh, that person must have had a hard life, which is the case in a lot of times. But sometimes, especially for me, it was just my own feelings of not being good enough and not wanting to deal with my stressors. And I think that a lot of people need to realize that just because someone is depressed doesn't mean that they necessarily have something terrible going on in their lives, which means that a lot of the symptoms can be hidden really well.
Since losing Tommy, I think from the first day I realized that I couldn't let his death be for nothing. So I got involved in pretty much anything that I could, but specifically working with teens. We started a teen support group locally in our community, and we had one starting at Harlem Middle School a year and a half ago, and there's actually one that's going to be starting here at the high school. So these teen groups are just a place where kids can go who are struggling, that can talk about the things that they're feeling and the thoughts that they're having, where they won't be judged, and where they could just be heard and understood. And so teen groups have been something that I've got involved in since losing my son. But also I'm part of an organization called Shatter Our Silence, and we do a lot of speaking at different schools about the warning signs and about things that people should ask and things that people should do just to become more educated. I think education is a huge part of saving lives. The more educated we can get, and the more that friends, family members, and teachers can learn the signs and learn the things to ask, the more lives we'll save in the long run. So just talking about it and being open. I know from the day one I said I wasn't going to be ashamed of my son and the way he lost his life, because it's not something to be ashamed of. He was hurting, he was in pain, and that's just the reality of it. And I was going to talk about it and let people know that it is okay to talk about, and it's not something they need to keep quiet about.
Have the strength to reach out. I know it's really hard, and there's this big stigma around depression and suicide, and that it's embarrassing and you're weak if you have depression. But I definitely think that being able to reach out and tell someone how you're feeling is one of the strongest things you can do. And I recommend, talking to friends, and then friends, if people are reaching out to you, have the courage to go to someone above you that can help them. A lot of friends are afraid of losing friends, or are afraid of not being able to help in the right way. But the biggest thing that someone can do is reach out and ask for help.
Remember, you're never alone, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Do your part to help those suffering with mental illness, whether it be friends, family, or even strangers.
And
That's the show, Harlan.